On the evening of that Thanksgiving Day, Jack spent it on his grandfather's farm. The smell of roasted turkey was still wafting through the house. Jack lay down on the couch, then he burped loudly before the grandmother said to him, as she took off her pink apron firmly, "Am I going to spend all night asking for your help?" While Jack took up a game on his personal mobile phone, he fought a ferocious werewolf. "Take this to the trash can," she pointed toward the stuffed trash bag. Yes, I will," Jack said, not looking at her. "Give us a hand for once," Grandma said loudly, while Jack exhaled angrily, throwing his phone on the couch. Then he said as he got up, "Can't someone else do that?" He inhaled the scent of buttery mashed potatoes. Outside, Jake pulled the heavy garbage bag. A cool, refreshing breeze blew, swaying the tall trees that lined the road leading to the metal container. The moon, which was about to be full, was behind Jack in the direction of Grandpa's house. Jack looked around as he walked when he heard footsteps coming from the Sanders farm. When he lifted the lid of the container, he heard a rustling sound from the nearby trees. "Grandpa?" he exclaimed nervously after turning around. There was no answer. The moon was directly over Grandpa's house. The rustling sound became louder, as if something large was moving through the bushes. Jake froze, the hairs on his neck standing up, when he saw two bright eyes peeking out from the mysterious tree line. His hand began to shake as a huge, mysterious shape appeared, and then another shape, the outlines of a wolf, but much larger than any wolf Jake had ever seen. He slowly began to back away as the monsters got closer, the wolf's lip pulling back in a snarl. The growling sounds continued from more than one place until Jake lost his grip on the garbage bag and it slipped out of his hand, and the remains of food were scattered across the wet leaves. The wolves pounced and tore apart the feast, but as Jake turned to run, one of the creatures suddenly raised its head, fixing its predatory gaze on the terrified boy. He took another winding path to reach Grandpa's house from behind, while the wolf was chasing him, its ghostly howls filling the night. He started approaching the farmhouse, and the moon was completely over the house. Two bright eyes in front of Jake approached through the darkness towards him. Nature screamed at Jake when he heard the raging sounds of farm animals, dogs and wolves. The sound of the trees swaying and the cold air also became annoying. He screamed, avoiding them, until it became clear that the eyes in front of him were blocked by a metal mesh fence to which the eyes were attached, until it became clear that they were the eyes of a dog. This dog began barking at the wolf, and Jake continued to run along the fence while looking back. The wolf approached and opened his mouth, but Jake increased his speed and screamed loudly. The wolf's teeth bit into the air until they almost bit off Jake's heel. As he approached the Johnsons' farm, he noticed a line of eyes that he tried to avoid as well. He approached the other edge of the road until it turned out to be a row of goats standing on the edge of the metal fence. The wolf became a little distant, but it was still following Jack. The moonbeams lit up behind a tree, and it looked like a ghost screaming at night. Jake ran away from it, even though it was still just a tree. When he got close enough to his grandfather's farm, the family dog ran towards him and barked violently until the wolf disappeared completely. Jake slammed the back door shut behind him. Then he stopped and leaned on his knees, panting inside. The grandmother approached him with a tea tray in her hand, then frowned when she saw him trembling. He raised his head and said with bated breath, "I was almost eaten by wolves." "Now, Jake, you tell tales of wolves in the backyard. Bless your heart. Then you'll say, 'I saw Bigfoot doing a dance there too,'" Grandma said, and offered him a cup of tea. He drank some of it and spat it out. "It's so sweet it hurts my teeth." Everyone in the South Knows it's tea-flavored sugar, Grandma said. Jake was still panting. Calm down. There are no wild animals around, the grandmother said, and left him to the living room. Cassie sat cross-legged as she put the baby's nipple back into her baby Emily's mouth on her rocking chair, and she stopped crying. After she wiped the child's nose with the top of her apron, which was dirty with food residue, at the same time she said into the phone, resting between her ear and shoulder, "Where are you now?" She looked at her husband, Lucas, questioningly, who was reclining on the sofa, lazily flipping through short videos. Then she hit her husband lightly with a ladle in her hand, and he began to mutter angrily before she said into the phone impatiently, "Of course he is ready for that, but I insist that you come without help." Her husband sighed in relief, then continued as she arranged the tablecloth in front of her husband. "Rely on your memory, Chris." Then, as she returned to the kitchen, she continued on the phone. "Yes, well done, exactly as Sophia said." She caught her naughty child, Chris, who was running in front of her and saying, "I want to see the police car." She continued on the phone, talking to her brother Chris, while she was pulling the child, "Shame on you, Chris, for forgetting your older sister's address." She forcefully took the coloured pencils from her child's hand and gave them to his older sister, Olivia, again, who sat down to finish her colouring. Then, as she ended the call, she sat her child, Chris, in front of a short table away from his sister, Sophia, with puzzle pieces scattered on it. She said to her husband Lucas, who seemed preoccupied with his phone, "No matter what happens, do not give either of them the phone." And he did not answer her while he noticed a woman screaming in a short video. The child, Chris, pointed outside, where the sound of a police car rang out outside, "I want to see the policeman." In the kitchen, she held 3 jars with one hand, and one of them fell while she was opening the door of the cupboard at the top with the other hand, and the spices spilled onto her apron and onto the floor, mixing with shards of glass. Cassie cursed as she exhaled angrily and searched for something while looking around, lost. A shadow outside moved through the glass window, and the bushes shook with it, but Cassie did not notice any of it. When she arrived at the utility storeroom, she was searching among the old shelves and boxes. She found an old metal toolbox. Her heart stopped when she saw what was inside: duct tape, rope, and plastic sheets covered in dark, dried spots. At that moment, Cassie heard a squeak. She slowly turned around to see a large figure appear in the doorway holding a blood-stained knife. Before she could scream, a large hand clamped down on her mouth as she was helplessly dragged into the shadows. Big Chris and his girlfriend arrived, and little Chris greeted them. "Where is Dad?" Big Chris said to baby Chris after they had waited a long time in front of the door. Everyone sat at the dining table, and Sophia placed the dishes that Cassie had prepared. "Don't eat without Cassie," Sophia said. "Cassie told me she was going to be late," Lucas said, without looking up from his low-powered phone. "No problem, we'll wait," Big Chris said as he looked at the roasted turkey. Lucas looked at the turkey before saying, while touching his nose, "Cassie said you should eat without me. You don't want Cassie to be angry with me?" Cassie noticed Lucas's worried look when he touched his nose. "I won't eat without Cassie," she said firmly. "I also don't want my older sister to be angry with me," Big Chris said. Sophia looked at him disapprovingly. "Her phone is off. Where did she say she was going?" Sophia asked. She didn't say, if Cassie isn't home, she's in one of two places, the store or the storeroom. Lucas said after a while of reading the funny post. I'll go to her, feed the kids with you, Sophia said, patting her friend Chris on the back. Cassie usually eats alone, Big Chris said, looking at the food as Sophia left them, and Lucas began to eat already. Everyone finished eating Thanksgiving food, while little Chris was fighting with Olivia and screaming. Emily cried in her chair. The tablecloths on the floor were coloured with coloured pencils along with the surfaces. Children's toys were thrown everywhere. Mum, the thorn hit my foot, little Chris crying. Big Chris wiped his mouth with a tissue, and Lucas put down his dead phone and turned off. They raised their heads amidst the noise and said, at the same time, "Where's Cassie?" Then they saw Sophia, who stood collapsed at the door and let out a scream of terror while holding an apron stained with blood.